Hello, Brenna Bockham with Collective Wealth Planning. If you've recently received an inheritance from a loved one, you're probably experiencing some mixed emotions. It can be a challenging time that often includes a combination of mourning and nostalgia, and often an overarching feeling of wanting to do the right thing. If you only have 30 seconds, scroll to the description part of this video and click on the links. One will take you to the infographic that I'm about to review, and the other is a checklist that I review with my client families who are navigating an inheritance. It summarizes the financial implications that you're going to want to keep in mind. For those of you with a few more minutes, let's walk through this infographic together, starting with some statistics about inheritance. While it varies widely, the average middle-class inheritance is around $110,000, according to a 2019 survey of consumer finances. And there's a bit of a disconnect here because according to a different survey by HSBC, most American individuals expect to leave about $67,000 more than that. So this difference might be due to unexpected taxation during the transfer of assets. And finally, you may have heard the idiom from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Statistics show that between the inheritance your parents left to you and what you may leave to your children, the odds are there will be very little left for your grandchildren. So how can you serve as a good steward of the inheritance that you've received? Here are some important questions to ask yourself. The first is, what is it? What is this inheritance comprised of? Is it securities like stocks or bonds or mutual funds? And if so, is it in an IRA or a brokerage account? Is it held in a trust or in the name of the individual? Is it in real estate? Is it personal property like jewelry or art or antiques? All of these have unique considerations regarding tax, liquidation requirements, and more. The next is to think about the goals you have for this inheritance. Because money is unfortunately taboo in many areas, many families don't discuss it, which means an inheritance is often an unexpected gift, and receiving one can open up opportunities that you never thought possible before. Those opportunities can involve liquidating the money for immediate use, investing it for the future, or giving some of it to meet philanthropic desires. Often it's some combination. And it's not uncommon for those who inherit to want to honor their heir in some way. And there are a whole lot of options to accomplish that. As mentioned earlier, the tax liability involved in your inherited assets and how you can use them varies widely. Some inherited assets receive a step up in basis, like after-tax brokerage accounts, and that means that the tax liability is relatively low early on. Others, like IRA accounts, are 100% taxable as ordinary income, and they come with a required minimum distribution deadline that is important to keep track of. Another important question to ask is whether this inheritance comes with any problems. So whether it's from other beneficiaries, disagreements in the interpretation of the estate documents, or a new expectation of support from your family members, several changes can come with this new financial obligation, and it's good to take stock of and be aware of those early on. Some financial implications that an inheritance can include updating your cash flow plan. So does this inheritance come with one of those distributions I just mentioned? Is it going to impact your cash flow today? Tax planning is a huge piece of all financial planning, particularly inheritance, as we talked about. It often opens up the opportunity to explore purchases or pay off debt that you hadn't thought about before. Regardless of where or the amount, receiving an inheritance almost always merits a fresh look at your estate plan. For example, while a will may have been sufficient before, your asset size and new goals may now benefit from establishing a trust of some kind. So it's great to take a high-level look at your options and visit with your estate planning attorney. Equally ubiquitous, an influx of money in whatever form warrants a fresh look at your overall asset allocation and investment strategy. So what pots of money and investments do you have designed for specific needs, and how are those invested or not invested? When we face loss, it is normal for our brains to move into logistics planning. It's a self-preservation method. So when your left brain needs to lead and to plan, here are a couple of resources for your head. The book Sudden Money has been a staple in inheritance and sudden money planning since 2000, and it still has legs. And what I love about this book and why I have it at the top of my list is that it takes a realistic approach to inheritance. It is not a money event, it is a life transition involving a whole lot more than just money. Family Trusts, this one provides a step-by-step guide for those of you navigating the settlement of an estate. It's a really wonderful resource to consult if you're creating your own estate plan too, which is a common takeaway from receiving an inheritance. It sparks in us, oh, I need to get a plan together. The next is a checklist that I mentioned at the start of this. This is the one that I review with my client families when they receive an inheritance, and it covers all the financial planning implications that we've talked about one by one. And finally, NOLO. This is a great free resource. It distills 50 plus years of legal authority into one spot and provides you resources on all types of legal matters, including estate and gift tax laws. So that can be helpful to review before you meet with an estate planning attorney. And finally, when your right brain needs some attention, when you need to take care of the part of you that is in mourning and in pain from the loss, here are a few resources to explore. Bearing the Unbearable is all about navigating the path of grief. And I like it because it's broken into short chapters that serve as accessible invitations to lean into and out of as your grief journey unfolds. Receiving an inheritance often brings up feelings of obligation, of stewardship, and sometimes of guilt about how you should or you shouldn't be spending that money. So I love The Soul of Money. I think it's an excellent book for any time, but it can bring around really powerful insight when read through the lens of receiving an inheritance. It encourages us to look at our attitudes toward money, how we earn and spend and give. And this is valuable information for us to take as we try to serve as good stewards of what we've received. And as I mentioned a minute ago, it's common that receiving an inheritance sparks some interest in us to get our own plan together. And oftentimes we learn some valuable lessons from our loved ones in their last few months and in the time after their passing. Maybe you saw them navigate long-term care, the impact of a perfectly or not so perfectly organized estate plan, or their satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the legacy that they built. This last book, Mom, Dad, We Need to Talk, is designed for adult children who need to understand their parents' financial situation. And that may be you. Or maybe you are the mom or dad who needs to talk about your financial and estate plan with your adult children. Either way, this book can provide a great starting place for the conversation. A lot of moving parts come with receiving an inheritance, and it can be hard to reconcile the technical with the emotional, and it's, of course, impossible to separate them. And I hope you take some comfort in knowing that there are advisors who are comfortable walking both paths with you. I am one of many, and I warmly invite your questions, comments, and thoughts when you're ready. Stay well.